much, Ashley. I'm by no means, I'm not an expert in this at all, but I will provide you with some information tonight. So as Ashley said, my name's Anne Marie, and I'm with the outreach team with the Canada Revenue Agency. So I am, like I said, great to be here tonight to be able to provide you guys with some information, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions. If there's any questions that I'm not able to answer, I'll take those questions and I will check with the disability unit and try and get some answers for you. I do have a lot of information here to provide, so it may get a little bit overwhelming at times. So we will break for questions, like Ashley said after I talk about a bit about the disability tax credit. We'll get into some questions before we move on to the one-time payment, and also we're going to touch on our community volunteer income tax program as well. So we'll get started on this. And I
just want to check in and make sure everybody can see Anne Marie's screen. Can everybody see the presentation that is there? Okay, perfect. Yeah, we're all good.
Perfect. So like I said, I'm no expert. So what in my role in outreach, so my role in outreach is to tell you about the disability tax credit, to tell you about the eligibility criteria of the disability tax credit, how to apply for the disability tax credit, how the form is processed, also about how to claim it, or the eligibility period, and how to claim the disability tax credit on your income tax return. What happens if your application's denied? What can you do? As well as touch on the one-time payment for persons with disabilities, and how the disability tax credit can open the gateway to other programs, such as the Registered Disability Savings Plan. And I'll touch on some resources that are available, as well as the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. So the disability tax credit, we also call the DTC for short. It's a non-refundable tax credit that reduces the amount of income tax that a person with a disability or the supporting family members may have to pay. So the purpose of the disability tax credit is to provide greater tax equity by allowing some relief for disability costs, since these are unavoidable additional expenses that other taxpayers don't have to face. So this non-refundable tax credit may reduce the amount of tax payable to zero. And if the person with the disability is eligible for the disability tax credit, so they can claim the disability amount on their tax return, or they can also transfer all or part of the amount to a spouse or a common law partner, or to another supporting family member. If it's a child with the disability tax credit, well, then the parent can claim the disability amount on their tax return. And when we talk about supporting family members who can claim the amount, it could be, like I just said, parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, nieces, or nephews of the person with the disability, or their spouse or common law partner. So let's get right into the eligibility criteria. So there are different reasons for which a person can be eligible for the disability tax credit. In all cases, the person must have a severe and prolonged impairment in physical or mental functions. An impairment is prolonged if it's lasted or if it's expected to last at least 12 months. And another criteria is that the person must be markedly restricted by the impairment at least 90% of the time. There is a self-assessment questionnaire that's available on the website, and as well in our disability tax credit guide, so a DTC guide, which is RC4064. So that guide is available by downloading it on our website, or you can actually order a copy as well from on the website, and they can send it to you in the mail. So claims for the disability tax credit are considered on a case-by-case basis. So it is the effect of one or more impairments in physical or mental functions on a person's ability to perform basic activities of daily living that determines whether a person is eligible for the DTC, and not the medical condition. So that's really important to remember that, to note that. So it's not based on what the medical condition is, it's based on how that impairment is affecting you in your everyday living. So two people could have the same medical condition, but the effects of the impairment could be different. So just an example, the example that I have here is a walking impairment. So two people may have a walking impairment, but one is able to walk without taking an extremely long time, while the other needs a walker and must stop frequently to rest to be able to walk the same distance. So again, two people with the same impairment it doesn't go by what the impairment is, it goes by what, how it affects them in their daily living. So some of the categories. So you must meet the requirements for eligibility in one of the following categories. So in vision, the basic activities of daily living, which include hearing, walking, eliminating, which refers to bowel and bladder functions, feeding, dressing, or mental functions necessary for everyday life, or life-sustaining therapy. And it's important to note that the cumulative effects of significant restrictions are also taken into account. So we're going to touch on the categories a little bit more in detail. So in a lot of these, and before I get into it, if you do have the disability guide that I just mentioned, the RC 4064, in the guide, it gives some great examples as well for each of the basic activities of daily living. So a lot of the information is available there, and it gets a little bit more thorough as well. So as one of the criteria that I just mentioned is vision. So you will qualify if you're considered to be blind. A person is considered blind if, even with the use of corrective lenses and medication, the visual acuity in both eyes is 20/200 or less with the Stellan chart, or the greatest diameter of field of vision in both eyes is 20 degrees or less. And the basic activities of daily living. So you are considered markedly restricted in at least one of the basic activities of daily living if you're unable to do a basic activity of daily living, or it takes you an inordinate amount of time to do a basic activity of daily living. And when we talk about inordinate amount of time, this is a clinical judgment made by a medical practitioner who observes a recognizable difference in the time it takes a person to do an activity. So usually this is 3 times the average time needed to complete the activity by a person who does not have the impairment. So I'll talk about give you a couple of examples in each of the basic activities of daily living. So Anita, for speaking, for example, Anita must rely on other means of communication, such as sign language or a symbol board at least 90% of the time. In a doctor's office, Cedric's doctor must ask him to repeat words and sentences several times, and it takes Cedric an inordinate amount of time to make himself understood. An example of hearing, Elaine must rely completely on lip reading or sign language at least 90% of the time to understand a spoken conversation, despite the use of hearing aids. For walking, Rose must always rely on a wheelchair outside of the home, even for short distances. Eliminating for bowel and bladder functions. So Sarah needs a device for eliminating, which causes her to take an inordinate amount of time to manage her bowel and bladder functions. Or Albert is incontinent of bladder functions at least 90% of the time, and he takes an inordinate amount of time to tend to his elimination as he needs incontinence pads. Feeding, Patricia needs tube feeding at least 90% of the time. Dressing, due to pain, stiffness, decreased dexterity, Paul takes an inordinate amount of time to dress himself on a daily basis. Or Peter cannot dress himself without the help of another person. Mental functions necessary for everyday life, they would include memory, problem solving, goal setting and judgment, and adaptive functioning. So examples that I have, Agnes is unable to leave the house due to anxiety at least 90% of the time, despite medication and therapy. Gerald is independent in some aspects of everyday living. However, despite medication and therapy, he needs daily support and supervision due to an inability to accurately interpret his environment. Terry cannot make a common, simple transaction, such as buying food at the grocery store, without the help at least 90% of the time. Bridget experiences psychotic episodes several times a year. Given the unpredictability of the psychotic episodes and the other defining symptoms of her impairment, for example, the lack of initiative or motivation, disorganized behavior and speech, she continues to need daily supervision. So that's some of the examples of the activities of daily living. There's also life-sustaining therapy. So the criteria is met when therapy is needed to support a vital function, even if it eases the symptoms at least 3 times per week for an average of at least 14 hours a week. So what counts in the 14 hours? So you must dedicate the time for the therapy. That is, you have to take time away from your normal everyday activities to receive it. It includes the time you may need to set up a portable device. For example, you may have to dedicate time for chest physiotherapy to ease breathing or need kidney dialysis to filter blood. If the therapy requires a regular dosage of medication that needs to be adjusted daily, the time spent on activities directly related to determining the dosage and administering the medication can be counted in the 14 hours per week requirement. For example, time spent on the following activities for insulin therapy: checking blood glucose levels, preparing and administering insulin, calibrating necessary equipment, testing ketones, keeping a logbook of blood glucose levels. If a child cannot do the activities related to the therapy because of their age, the time spent by the child's primary caregivers to do and supervise these activities can be counted in the 14 hours per week requirement. So for example, a child with type 1 diabetes, supervision includes having to wake the child at night to test their blood glucose levels, or checking the child to decide if more glucose testing is needed before or after a physical activity, and other supervisory activities that can reasonably be considered necessary to adjust the dosage for insulin. So a couple of things that would not be included in the 14 hours would be counting carbs, exercising, meal preparation, attending appointments, or shopping for medication. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the cumulative effects of significant restrictions. You could also be eligible for the disability tax credit, even if you do not quite meet the criteria for markedly restricted. You may still be considered eligible if you are substantially restricted. That is, you have a combination of significant restrictions that add up to being markedly restricted. So these restrictions must be present in 2 or more of the basic activities of daily living, or in vision and 1 or more of the basic activities of daily living. Again, you must be considered either markedly restricted all or substantially all of the time. So again, that is 90% of the time, or significantly restricted in 2 or more of the basic activities of daily living, including a vision impairment, at least 90% of the time. So you see an example there on your screen that Maria always takes a long time for walking, dressing, and feeding. The extra time it takes her to do these activities, when added together, is equal to being markedly restricted. So her impairment is not only in just 1 basic activity of daily living, it's affecting her in 3: walking, dressing, and feeding. So those together would be considered markedly restricted. Another example, Jerry can walk 100 meters, but then he must take time to recuperate. He can carry out mental functions for everyday life, but can concentrate on any topic for only a short period of time. So the cumulative effect of these 2 significant restrictions is equal to being markedly restricted, such as being unable to do one of the basic activities of daily living. So again, you can look at maybe your impairment is affecting you not in just 1 activity, basic activity of daily living, it's affecting you in many, so the cumulative effect. So Ashley asked me earlier, who can certify the disability tax credit in these categories that I had just talked about? So medical doctors and nurse practitioners can certify all sections of the disability tax credit certificate that would be completed that you would bring into your doctor. So they can complete all sections. So there's other sections can be completed by specialists as well. So for example, an optometrist can complete the vision section. An audiologist can complete the hearing section. An occupational therapist can certify the walking, feeding, and dressing sections, as well as the cumulative effects of these activities. A physiotherapist can certify the walking section. A psychologist can certify the section on the performance of mental functions necessary for everyday life. And a speech language pathologist can certify the speaking section. So just keep in mind, specialists can certify certain sections. A medical doctor or a nurse practitioner can certify all sections. And sometimes we'll get asked as well that, can we have a combination? Maybe you have a specialist and your family doctor. Can they both do it together? So when your medical doctor or your specialist sends in information, doesn't send in the form, because you would send in the form, complete the form, you can add additional documents to the form, which I will get into as well. That's on the next slide. So applying for the credit. So the form T2201, so the disability tax credit certificate, has two parts to it. So part A and part B. So part A is filled out by the person with the disability or a supporting person, or the parent if it's a child with a disability, or a legal representative can fill out that part of the form. Part B has to be filled out by, a medical practitioner. So one of the ones that I had just mentioned on the previous slide. So they have to complete it, sign it, and certify. And they can, like I just said, they can also include copies of medical reports, any diagnostic tests, or any other medical information with the application. When the doctor fills it out, there's a part of the form is check boxes. And then there's another part of the form, it says effects of the impairment. And that is what's very important for the doctor to complete and provide the information. It's not a lot of space on the form, but they can certainly add in sheets with extra information to that for sure. So after parts A and parts B are filled out and signed, the form is then sent to the CRA. Keep a copy for yourself. Always keep a copy for yourself. A lot of people will send in the original and then they don't have a copy for themselves. So it's always nice to keep a copy for your books. Or what if something happened and that got lost in the mail? Good to have a copy. And you can also send it electronically. So you don't have to just send it by mail. You can send it electronically through our online service, which is called My Account. And another thing that I like to tell people, it's really helpful if you spend time documenting and identifying areas where your impairment impacts your life before you visit your doctor, and bring that along. So your doctor only sees you for a short period of time, and individuals with a disability and their family members experience the impacts of the disability on a daily basis. So I always try to say, you go to the doctor, you may have 4 different things you want to tell the doctor about. You get there, you've been waiting a long time, you get in to see the doctor, you may feel rushed because maybe you have another appointment, and you talk about 2 of those 4 things and you leave and you forget to mention the other 2 things. So it's always nice to go in, have your information, take a log of how that impairment is affecting you in your everyday living, and you take that then, and when you sit down with your doctor to have the form completed, you have this additional information that you can provide to them. So your doctor's role is to use their best judgment, their best professional judgment when completing the form. They will certify the sections that apply to your impairment and give medical opinion of its effects. But again, like I said, because you're living with that impairment every day, keep track of how it's affecting you and bring that in when you see your doctor. So CRA is going to make the determination of eligibility based on the information from the doctor. So the form T2201, you can print that off right directly from the website, so Canada.ca/disability-tax-credit. They don't make it easy. Or you can order the form as well, and it can be sent out to you in the mail. Or if there's further questions, like I said, some of the questions tonight I may not be answering if it's specific to your situation. I may not be able to answer, and that would be because I don't have access to your account. That's not information that I have. Then you would have to call our general inquiries line. And also CRA does provide accessible forms, publications, and personalized correspondence in alternate formats. So we can send alternate formats if requested. So we have our materials available in digital audio, so MP3, e-text, braille, and large print. And they can be ordered as well on our website or through our general inquiries line. So if you're receiving Canada Pension Plan or Canada Pension Plan or Quebec Pension Plan disability benefits or workers' compensation benefits or other types of disability or insurance benefits, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're eligible for the disability tax credit. You have to apply for the disability tax credit. So these programs have other purposes and different criteria, such as an individual's inability to work. So you have to apply for the DTC as a separate process. So that's a question gets asked, if I have CPP disability, can I automatically get DTC or vice versa? And no, they're two different processes and two completely different forms that need to be completed, going to two completely different departments as well. So again, it's very important to keep in mind that the eligibility for the DTC is based on the information given by the medical practitioner describing the effects of the impairment has on on a person's ability to do the basic activities of daily living and not the medical condition itself. I know I say that probably, I said it earlier, I said it again, but it's something we really try to stress as well to make sure people are aware of that. And when your medical practitioner is filling out Part B, going back to the application, filling out Part B, make sure that they outline in full detail the effects of the impairment on the form itself. So like I said, it's nice to take that, if you have that information written down when you go see your doctor, that's additional information that you can provide to them. So the CRA would never charge a fee to process that form. So you send in that form T2201 and we'll never charge you a fee. However, medical practitioners can charge a fee to fill out that form. So, and I know there's no set fee as well, so it depends on your medical practitioner. Keep in mind that you may be able to claim that amount that you're paying to your doctor to fill out that form as a medical expense as well on your tax return. So after we receive, or the CRA, the disability unit receives the completed and signed form T2201, they'll review the application. So CRA processes about 200,000 T2201s every year, and they're reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So our goal is to issue your notice of determination of eligibility or letter indicating a reason for a delay in processing your application within 8 weeks of receiving the disability tax credit certificate. So if the CRA determines that you're eligible for the DTC, you will receive a letter providing with the details surrounding the eligibility, so the period of eligibility. And if it determines that you're not eligible for the DTC, you'll receive a letter explaining why the application is denied. I'll get a little bit more into that in a minute. So sometimes the CRA needs clarification. So you may get a letter from CRA saying there's a delay in processing your T2201 as we had to ask your medical practitioner for additional information. So in this case, we'll send a letter to the doctor and asking them with a list of questionnaire, asking them for more information. I always try to tell people, if you get a letter saying that there's a delay in processing because we're gone back to your doctor for further information, it's a good idea for you to follow up with your medical practitioner to ensure that they have received it and they have completed it. So if your form is approved, you do not need to send a new form each year unless we ask you to tell you that we need one. When your eligibility is about to expire, we will notify you 1 year in advance, as well as the year that it expires. So you can also view your disability tax credit information in My Account. So if you have the disability tax credit and you're wondering the approval, the eligibility period, you can look at it in My Account and it would show you there to what year it's approved or if it's permanent, or as well, you can always call the CRA General Inquiries line. And if you're approved for the disability tax credit and your medical condition improves, you must tell us. And this is indicated in your approval letter. So once you get your approval letter, it would list on it as well exactly that if it improves, you have to let us know. So after the disability tax credit application is approved, you can claim the disability amount then on your tax return. So to claim the disability amount for yourself, you would enter it on line 31600 of your income tax return. And to claim it for a dependent, such as your child, or maybe a parent that you're looking after, or an aunt or an uncle, you would then claim it on line 318. If it's a spouse, you would then claim it online and they're transferring it to you, it would be on line 32600. When you send the application in, so on the application on the very first page where you complete Part A, you can tick a box. So it's section 3 of Part A, and it says, if I'm approved for the disability tax credit, do you want your tax returns adjusted? So you tick that box, and when CRA, if your disability tax credit certificate is approved, then we'll automatically recalculate your tax returns for previous years to include that disability tax credit. And maybe you don't want to, you wouldn't tick the box because maybe you know it's going to be transferred. So for example, a child, you wouldn't tick that box. The child would not have previous tax returns to claim that amount. And you can ask for adjustments on a tax return up to 10 years. So if someone is approved, say the disability tax credit certificate was received and approved by the CRA today, so in 2020, and it's approved from the year 2010, we can go back those 10 years and adjust the tax return to include that credit for 10 years. If it was approved from 2008 onward, we still can only go back 10 years. So we'd go back to 2010, to go back 10 calendar years to 2010 to add that, to adjust those tax returns. So what do you do if your application is denied? So the notice of determination, so the letter that you receive, is going to explain why the application was denied. So that's why, and check your form. So if you receive a letter and it says why it's denied, you can then check your copy. Again, that's another good reason to keep your copy of your form that the doctor completed, so you can review between the information. So check the reason, since we base our decision on the information that's provided by the medical practitioner. If you disagree with CRA's decision and you have additional information from a medical practitioner that we didn't have in the first review of your application, send it to the CRA. We'll then review your file again using the new information. And you also have the right to file a formal objection to appeal the decision. And the time limit for filing an objection is 90 days after we mail the notice of determination. So I'm going to stop here for questions there now, and I'll go back to the other screen. There we go. So I will stop here before I get into anything else, and because there's a lot of information, and stop for questions.
So I've just been monitoring the chat while you've been presenting. And first of all, thank you so much for offering to, or agreeing to, because I did call and I was like, hey, you guys present. So thank you absolutely for taking the time out to present. So some of the questions, one was around, so we do have some professionals who are here and we have a guidance counselor who's present. And one of the questions was, can a guidance counselor fill out the form? Now, after chatting with you, I kind of already know the answer. but I figured I would allow that because I'm sure guidance counselors get parents coming in all the time asking questions and, trying to figure out who can fill out what, and then go from there. So if you want to just answer that one.
So only medical, it has to be a medical doctor or a nurse practitioner or one of the specialists that I called out earlier for each basic activity of daily living, like the audiologist for hearing, physiotherapist, a speech pathologist, psychologist. I'm probably missing some depending on the basic activity daily living, but no, a guidance counselor or a social worker cannot complete the form. And it's stated on the form who can complete the form. It has to be a medical practitioner. So your family doctor can fill it.
So even, because we've talked about the form, and I can pull the form up just to kind of show everyone. Anne-Marie, if you're fine with that. Okay, so I am just going to exit out of sharing your screen and share my own. There we go. So this is the certificate.
Yes, exactly.
So as you can see, there are a variety of sections. There's section 1, which is just your basic demographics. Section 2 is important information about you if you are the one claiming the tax credit. Again, if you have a dependent, like if you are a parent of an adult who is listed as a dependent, then they ask questions relevant to that as well.
Before you say that, get into that, Ashley. It's only if you have an adult child with a disability, if the child lives with you, then you don't have to complete the question 2. It's only if you've answered no to question 1. If the person does not live with you, then they're asking for support. What type of support?
Yeah. So then you move on to your income tax and benefit return and authorization. So this is the part, a medical doctor, nurse practitioner, and optometrist, right? So it specifies there. Same with speaking. Now, when we're talking about ASD, there are many of these that aren't going to be applicable. You may not have any issues speaking, hearing, seeing, or walking. In that situation, a medical practitioner is trained to be able to assess, your hearing just as you would in a regular checkup. Same with eliminating, feeding, dressing. This section here is where ASD would kind of fit. So the mental functions necessary for everyday life. So we've talked a little bit about what ASD is, and I'm sure there are many professionals and parents with lived experience who can kind of talk to it. You may not have a physical disability, but it may impact your ability to hold a job. If you struggle with social interactions, it may interact with your ability to go to school. And we all know that ASD also has a strong correlation with some other diagnoses. So that's what this part here is for. And Anne-Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but a medical professional can fill out this stuff, but a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, can do the mental functions.
Or medical doctor or nurse practitioner for the mental functions. Yeah, so mental functions, it's either of the 3, a medical doctor, nurse practitioner, or psychologist.
Right. So that is the form pretty much in a nutshell. They do ask you to identify the effects of your impairment, like what limitations do you have because of your disability. So, I mean, and if you are struggling with that and you want to speak with a clinical psychologist or you need to speak with somebody else, I mean, ASNL, we're certainly here for you to kind of help you through that. And then it's just basic check boxes. Now, I do know I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to allow Anne-Marie to share hers again before I get into the chat. Okay.
Here we go.
There we go. Perfect. So there's a couple questions here. So what happens if you are already receiving the disability tax credit and it expires? How soon should you apply? For example, if the tax credit expires in 2022, when should you resubmit the T2201 form?
It's expired in year 2022. I would then you could start the process then in 2021, even late 2021, or even summer of 2021. So you should receive, if it expires in 2022, you should receive a letter a year before. So 2021, you should receive a letter from CRA stating that the eligibility for your disability tax credit will expire the following year. And something to keep in mind, don't send the T2201 with your income tax return. So what happens is a lot of people just say, oh, I'm going to claim it on my tax return, so I'm going to send the form at the same time. What happens then is your tax return, the processing of your tax return gets delayed because we have to process the T2201 first. So always send in your T2201 before you're going to send in your tax return. Give it a chance to process, or send in your tax return, then send in your disability tax credit. Then once it gets processed, you can always go back and adjust the tax return.
All right. Another question. Can both my husband and I receive the disability tax credit, or is it only one partner per relationship?
Oh my goodness, the disability tax credit is not based on the family of if you're married, or if you have a common law partner, if you have children, or your income threshold. If it's based on your impairment. So if you have an impairment and you're approved for the disability tax credit, and your spouse has an impairment, they as well can be approved for the disability tax credit.
Perfect. How does being backdated work? Is the doctor filling out the form in 2020 saying that since 2015, so-and-so has had blank impairments? Just wondering how it would be backdated. Would it go back to the day of diagnosis, or what would happen?
On the form, it asks the doctor about when the impairment, or when the effects of the impairment. So it asks for the date, the year on that form. And if you went back to the form, I think you'll see it there, Ashley, under each activity, it'll say, when did that impairment start?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll go by that. And again, the information, CRA will determine if you're eligible for the disability tax credit, but with the information received on the form from the medical doctor.
Perfect. So if both a partner and two people in a relationship are identified and cannot work because they are markedly restricted due to medical disabilities, does that matter?
Can you say that again, Ashley?
I'll say the actual, okay, so both my husband and I cannot work and are markedly restricted due to our medical / disabilities. Does that matter, as in it's just one disability tax per household? But I think you kind of answered that question.
Yeah,
So
it's not one per household. You could be a family of 5, and you could have 3 children, and those 3 children have different impairments, and they could all be approved for the disability tax credit, and the parents as well. If you have an impairment and it's affecting you in your everyday living, you could be approved for the disability tax credit. It's not based on if you're, like I said, it's not based on if you're married, or if you're in a common law, you have a common law partner, or it's not based on your income levels either.
Mm-hmm. So another question about the letter that will tell you when it's expiring. What if you don't receive the letter?
Again, like I said earlier, what you should do if you have the disability tax credit and you're not sure of when it expires, you can, if you've registered online for our online My Account service, the information will be there, or call the CRA, the General Inquiries number, and their number is 1-800-959-8255. 8281. And if you call them, you can ask them about the disability tax credit that's on file, when it's expiring. And you can also ask them to send you a duplicate copy of your eligibility letter. If you lost that, you misplaced it, you can certainly ask them to send you a duplicate copy. And what I always try to tell people, because people say it's really hard to get through on those phone lines, call early in the morning. So if you're located here in Newfoundland, call at 9 o'clock. They're open from 9 to 5. If you call at 9, you're getting the local office before the rest of the country opens up. And usually the best time to call is Thursdays and Fridays. It's not as busy as Mondays and Tuesdays. So just a couple little hints.
So another question. My doctor says that eligibility requirements for disability tax credit have tightened up a lot in the past couple of years. Is this correct?
Well, the medical practitioner's role, as I said, it's for them to use their best professional judgment to fill out the form. And they certify the sections based on your impairment and give medical opinion of the effects of your impairment. And it's the CRA who will determine whether you're eligible for the disability tax credit or not, based on the information provided by your medical doctor.
Perfect. Is there a range of time to be eligible, or does it differ?
What do you mean, a range of time?
For example, like we may have, and I think this is what Jeanette's getting to, we may have adults who have been in the process of seeking a diagnosis for a variety of years. And when they get that diagnosis, it's what's been kind of queried throughout the entire process.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a length of time where that diagnosis has to be? Is it just from the date of diagnosis or the date of symptoms?
Yeah, I think it'll be based on what the medical practitioner provides to us and what's written in that form. I'm not exactly, I'd have to look at that form again, but it's based on what's in that form of when, I think it's when they started noticing the effects of the impairment. Now I could be wrong on that. I would have to, let me see if I can bring up that form as well.
Perfect. And I guess one of the questions that we do get is around RDSPs.
Yes.
So in order to be eligible for an RDSP, you have to be eligible for the disability tax credit. What happens if you're making contributions to an RDSP, but your disability tax credit expires?
Now, I'm not versed in the Registered Disability Savings Program. And as I mentioned to Ashley before, I have a colleague with the Employment Social Development Canada who we can reach out to her and get the information directly from her. She also does outreach on the program and can provide presentations. From what I remember, there has been a recent change in the disability, in the RDSP. It used to be, I think, that if you were no longer eligible for the disability tax credit, then you had to withdraw those funds, I think, from your RDSP. But I think that's recently changed. And I think those funds can now stay in the plan. That was changed in one of the budgets recently.
Okay. And how long do you have, like, what's the expiration date? Like, how long do you have until T2201 it expires and you need to get a new one? Is there a set term? There's
no set term because it depends on the impairment. Okay. So if one of the questions that's written here has your patient's impairment lasted, or is it expected to last for a continuous period of 12 months? And then it also says, if the impairment, has the impairment improved, or is it likely to improve to such an extent that the patient would no longer be blind, markedly restricted, in need of life-sustaining therapy, or have the equivalent of markedly restricted? So if the doctor says, yes, there's a chance of improvement, well, then the disability tax credit certificate is not going to be approved for permanent. So that's when we will say, okay, it's approved from 2020 to 2025. And then you would have, if the medical condition did not improve, the effects of the impairment did not improve, then you would send in a new application for the disability tax credit.
So in situations such as with ASD, which is a lifelong disability, would it be typical to have, and I guess that probably depends on the medical assessment that is completed, but when you have a disability that's there's no future of a cure or anything like that, because it is a disability and it's a lifelong disability. Will people typically only have to submit one T2201 when they have a permanent disability?
It could, yeah, there is times I have seen it that it says permanent, but even if it's permanent, the CRA could ask. They could ask for, again, go by the information that they receive from the medical doctor. So they could ask for a T2201 in the future. So the DTC eligibility is not guaranteed to be indefinite or be permanent. So again, like I said, a medical practitioner states that a person has a severe or prolonged impairment. However, the effects of the impairment could reduce over time with therapy. So in that case, they could say it's good for 5 years or 10 years, then we may have to look at sending in a new T2201. So based on the information, again, from the medical practitioner, the CRA would decide if the person's eligibility has to be reviewed in a few years to see if the impairment still restricts a basic activity of daily living.
And I guess one of the other questions is more about RDSPs. So when my husband's diagnosis formally confirmed next year, because he will be 50, he will not qualify for the RDSPs, even though the disability tax credit, I assume, would backdate maybe.
Well, if you're approved for the disability tax credit, it could be disability tax credit could be backdated. But again, getting into the RDSP side of things, I'm not versed in that. That's such a specific program that I can send those questions off. Like, you can roll those questions up, Ashley, to me, and we can send them off to my colleague with Employment Social Development Canada and get that information. And we can always set up a session with her as well at a presentation on just RDSPs.
Absolutely. And if the families and professionals would find that to be a benefit, meaning that's certainly something that we are talking about regularly with some of our other partners, because it really is a great opportunity around, having a pot of money when you get to a stage in your life when you're going to need it.
It's definitely a great program that's there. It's and it's one that they have recently been doing a lot of outreach to provide some more information on this program. So definitely, it's probably worth everybody's while to have a presentation done. And it's her name's Sarah. She would probably be the one who would give the presentation. She's based in Ottawa, but yeah, it's something that they've been doing quite regularly lately.
I have some questions of my own. When it comes to, say you have a child who's receiving the child tax disability credit, and they turn to the age of majority, do you have to reapply as an adult? How does that work?
Again, it depends on what the eligibility letter states. So sometimes you may have to reapply. So once the child turns 18, it could be a possibility that you would have to reapply for the T2201 again as the child is older. That's a possibility. There are possibilities as well that if CRA has if it's permanent and CRA has the child's social insurance number, it could be automatically transferred over to the social insurance number. A lot of times we may not have the child's social insurance number. So that could come into play there as well. So it could be a possibility that they would have to submit another one, or it could be, and that's hard for me to say. Again, it's case by case situation.
Perfect. All right. The CPP disability, which is different than disability tax credit because it's under Canadian pension plan, right?
Right.
Is that an option when they age out past 18?
The CPP disability?
Mhm.
I have no idea, to be honest. That's the CPP is all a program through Service Canada. So I'm only on the tax side of things, so the Canada Revenue Agency side of things. So
Okay.
how the CPP disability program works, that I would not be able to answer a question on.
And that may be something that I can kind of gather that information for our parents, and I can certainly help out with that.
And I also have, we have a colleague here with Service Canada based here in St. John's, who I can put you in touch with as well.
Perfect. That would be great. Are there any other questions? No? Going once?
Mm.
Going twice? You're welcome. Going 3 times. I feel like an auctioneer. I'm gonna let Emery finish up now with some information around that one-time disability credit that was handed out, and have you guys ask your questions. Oh, Angie has a question. Sorry. All I see is me. What do you do while you wait for the tax returns to be completed?
I don't understand her question.
The tax returns or the forms? Like the T. Hold on, she's checking.
The processing of the T2201 could take about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
If we received it with the tax return basically would be put aside until we process that T2201. As soon as the T2201, because that's a different unit, once that unit is finished processing the form, if it's approved, then or even if it's not approved, the information is then passed back to the processing unit who would be processing the tax return.
All right. She says
Did I
in
answer
terms
your
of
question?
I'm not sure. In terms of waiting, I assume for income or verification, I guess, what do you do in the interim? So from my experience, now Tam, eating craft dinner ain't nothing wrong with that. What do you do then? You don't get the money while you're waiting. However, once you get approved, it gets backdated to the time in which that occurs.
And keep in mind, the disability tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit.
Right.
So if it's a child who's been approved for the disability tax credit, then you would be eligible to receive the child disability benefit. So that's a benefit that you would receive in conjunction with the Canada Child Benefit. It's a non-taxable payment that you would receive monthly. Once a child turns 18, then the Canada Child Benefit stops. So the disability tax credit normally, if the child is out working, the child would then claim that disability tax credit on their tax return. So it's to help reduce any income tax that you may have to pay. If they don't have any taxable income, it can be transferred to a supporting person. If they don't have a supporting person to transfer that money to, what we always tend to say to people, though, the disability tax credit opens the doors to other programs. So even if you don't have taxable income, it does open the doors to the RDSP, for example. It opens the doors, which I will get into a little bit later in the presentation, just touch on the disability, on the Canada Workers Benefit Disability Supplement. It can open the doors to a provincial program. There's a provincial amount called the Newfoundland and Labrador Disability Amount. So it does open the doors to other programs as well.
And once everything is approved on CRA's end, and they are backdated with, I guess, whatever the original date is, they're usually given a large sum of money. Is that then taxed to death?
No. No, so that would be if you're receiving, so if it's a refund, if it's going against, if that credit is going against your taxable income, it may increase your refund. It may give you a refund. So maybe you had that credit gave you an additional $500 in a refund. Well, that refund is not taxable. So if you had a disability tax credit approved for 10 years and you received a lump sum payment of $4,000 or $5,000, that amount is not taxable because that would have been your refund. If it's a child and you receive the child disability benefit, you can receive large sums of money because the child disability benefit ranges at about $600 a month. So if you have a child that's approved for the disability tax credit and it's approved for a number of years backdated, they go back and calculate that. Again, that's a non-taxable. It's tax-free. You do not have to report that on your income tax return.
Perfect. All right. I am going to mute myself, but continue to monitor the chat.
Right.
And you can continue with the $600 thing and the income tax.
So can you still see the screen?
I can. Yep. Yeah, you're still sharing.
Perfect. So we'll just touch on the one-time disability payment that was recently announced by the Government of Canada. Well, announced back in August. So they're making the one-time $600 payment in recognition of the extraordinary expenses that persons with disability are facing during the pandemic. So these additional expenses may include higher costs for personal protective equipment, personal support workers, and access to other disability supports, higher costs for medical supplies and medication, higher internet costs associated with physical distancing, and increased use of taxis and home delivery services to get groceries and prescriptions. So the government is issuing this one-time payment by check or by direct deposit. So some were issued, I think the first lot were issued around November 1st. And again, there will be more issued in early 2021. So very important to always make sure that you have the correct direct deposit information or your address updated as well on with CRA. So this payment complements the one-time emergency supports, such as the special payment through the goods and services tax credit and the payment for seniors. So if it's a senior who's eligible for this payment as well, seniors with the disabilities who received the one-time payment, that was announced back in May, are also eligible for a reduced payment to seniors with disability if they meet the other requirements. So if you're a senior and you're eligible for both payments, you'd receive a total of $600. So maybe you've already received the $300 one-time payment for the old age security, well, then you would receive the extra $300. If you're a senior who received the $500 one-time payment for both the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, you would then receive the extra $100. So it's a total of $600. If it's a child that has the disability, then the parent or the caregiver would receive the $600 payment. So in order to be eligible for the one-time payment, so one of these has to apply to you. So you've been approved for the disability tax credit certificate and it has not expired, or you apply for the disability tax credit and the CRA receives your completed form by December 31st and it approves your application. So if you have the disability tax credit certificate already and it's not expired, you would receive this one-time payment. If you don't have a disability tax credit now and you send it in now and we receive the form and it approves your form, you'll receive that one-time payment. If you have been receiving the Canada Pension Plan Disability, so as of July 1st, 2020, you're receiving benefits from the Canada Pension Plan Disability or other ones, the Quebec Pension Plan Disability, or supports from Veterans Affairs, well, then you would receive the one-time payment. So you don't have to apply for the payment. It's automatically going to be sent if you fall into one of those categories. And again, parents with children with the disabilities, they would also receive the one-time payment for the child. And if parents share custody of a child, then the payment would be split between them, the same as the child disability benefit or the Canada Child Benefit as well. And that's just, again, touches on applying for the disability tax credit, which we talked about. And again, it's just that if you, for this one-time payment, it has to be received by December 31st. It was when it was originally announced, the application had to be in by September 21st, but they've recently extended it to December 31st. And if you need to confirm your eligibility or you're unsure of if we have the updated information or banking information or address, this is the phone numbers that you can call. So for the disability tax credit, that's the CRA General Inquiries number, the 1-800-959-8281. And then the Canada Pension Plan Disability, that's through Service Canada. So that's their phone number there, 1-800-277-9914. Quebec Pension Plan, and then Veterans Affairs as well is there, 1-66522-2122. For the disability tax credit for CRA, you can also check the My Account and confirm your eligibility as well. So as mentioned a few minutes ago, so having the disability tax credit can open the doors to other programs. So the child disability benefit. So if you get the Canada Child Benefit for a child who is eligible for the disability tax credit, you then may be entitled to the child disability benefit. So that's the best supplement to assist with raising the child disability benefit, similar to the Canada Child Benefit, that it is for children under the age of 18. The Canada Workers Benefit. So that if you're eligible for the disability tax credit and you had working income in the year, you may be able to claim the Canada Workers Benefit Disability Supplement. If you do your tax return by sending it in electronically, a lot of the times the program will pick it up automatically if you're entitled to the Canada Workers Benefit or the Canada Workers Benefit Disability Supplement. So the disability supplement is an additional amount of money on top of the Canada Workers Benefit. The Registered Disability Savings Plan, as I said, there's questions on that, intended to help parents or others save for the long-time financial security of a person who's eligible for the disability tax credit. So for more information on the Registered Disability Savings Plan, you can go to canada.ca/taxes-RDSP. And there's also an information sheet, the RC4460. And I actually have some RDSP guides, little guides, pamphlets in the office that we can always send out to you guys as well, if you'd like to have them in paper format. And again, provincially, like I said, there's the Newfoundland and Labrador disability amount as well for those who are approved for the disability tax credit. And there's a list of some additional resources that are available on the disability tax credit. So there's videos, self-assessment tools, the form and the guide. And I should say as well that if medical practitioners have questions when they're completing the forms or completing the questionnaire, the clarification forms, there is a phone number that's specific to medical practitioners. I don't have it here with me, but there is a phone number that medical practitioners would have that if they have a specific question, they have a different phone number that they can call as opposed to the general inquiries line. So are there any questions on that before I move on to the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, or any other questions that, on the disability tax credit itself?
It's awfully quiet in the peanut gallery.
and you know, Ashley, a lot of the times people may have questions after, and if they come to you after with questions, feel free to reach out to me, send your questions, no problem at all.
Absolutely. I believe Angela has a question, but it's not specific to ASD, but certainly ask it anyway. Now is the time. Is issues with like respiratory illnesses such as COPD and lung disease, is that considered a disability?
Again, it's not the medical condition. It's not based on the medical condition. It's based on the effects of the impairment. So how that impairment is affecting you in your everyday living. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. All right. And I think that's it. Dina, or I hope I'm saying that right. Dina, yes. I actually have the RDSP guide, and I will make arrangements for there to be a presentation on RDSPs for everyone, so that we can get some questions answered in regards to that. But in the interim, I can certainly send you the guide.
Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Sarah. I can send you her information tomorrow even, and you can touch base with her.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Looks like we're good, and we can
continue.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost through it there now. So I'm just going to touch on the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program. So some of you may be aware of what it is, and others may not. So the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program is a program that's a collaboration between CRA and community organizations and their volunteers. So volunteers with the community organizations help eligible individuals by doing their taxes for them for free. So which ensures that they get the benefits and credit payments to which they're entitled. So CVITP volunteers prepare tax returns, like I said, for free for people who have a modest income and a simple tax situation. So community organizations may also establish additional criteria or increase the suggested modest income amounts. We do know that some volunteers will complete tax returns for people who are maybe above this threshold. So this is just guidelines for the organizations and the volunteers. So to be eligible for the CVITP, so your total family income should be less than the amounts shown in the chart. Again, these are guidelines. One person, 35,000, two people, 45,000, three people, 47,500, more than three, an additional 2,500 for each additional person in the family. And when we talk about a simple tax situation, we talk about someone has no income or income from employment, pension, benefits such as the Canada Pension Plan, disability, or RRSPs, support payments, scholarships. Your tax situation is not simple if you're self-employed or you have employment expenses, or you have business or rental income or capital gains or losses, or you filed for bankruptcy, or completing tax return for a deceased person. So the volunteers complete tax returns, like I said, are simple tax returns, and they use the software when they are completing the returns. We do have some volunteers who may still do it on paper, but most volunteers will complete the tax returns via software. So we have many organizations here in the province who participate in this program. So CRA provides the participating community organizations and volunteers with training, with the software that's needed, access to a toll-free dedicated telephone inquiries line exclusive to community organizations and volunteers. When available, CRA will donate its surplus computers to community organizations hosting volunteer clinics. And the CRA also provides promotional products and services such as posters to help the organizations and volunteers with recruitment, or with advertising or promoting their tax clinic. Normally the tax clinics tend to take place typically most of them in March and April. Starting in mid-February, March and April is the bulk of them. This past year, due to the pandemic, we had to cancel a lot of the clinics due to social distancing and the lockdowns. So what we have moved into a lot of is doing virtual tax clinics. So a lot of the volunteers have been doing tax returns by following the social distancing. So they're doing modified drop-off. They've also done them through video conference and through video conference, modified drop-off. And there's another one that I'm forgetting. So we're trying to, our volunteers are there to help people ensure that they get their benefits and credits. So maybe there's somebody here, or somebody who would like to volunteer with the CVITP program. So if you want to help people in your community, volunteering, this one-way volunteer to help them do their taxes, to get their benefits and credits. So you register online at canada.ca/taxes-volunteer, and our registration has just opened. Once you register and you meet the security requirements, you have to be approved for e-file. So there's a two-step process. You register to be a CVITP volunteer, and then you register for an e-file account. Once that process is done, then you receive a call from our coordinator. So we have 2 coordinators for the program located here in St. John's, and they would be there to help guide you through the process, tell you about the training, and provide you with the software information, software key, everything that you're going to need to volunteer. If you're not already affiliated with an organization, they will affiliate you with an organization as well. So if it's something that you're interested in, you can certainly reach out. I'll put you in touch with the CVITP coordinators, and they can provide you with additional information. And keep in mind, our volunteers, it's completing simple tax returns, so you don't need to be an accountant. You don't have to have a tax background. We provide you with the training, and it is simple tax situations, tax returns that you are completing. If you are looking for, maybe you need assistance in getting your taxes filed, if you go onto the website at canada.ca/taxes-help, you will pick the province, you pick the community you're living in, and it'll provide you with information there on the volunteers. If there's no volunteer listed there, you can reach out to us and we can put you in touch with a volunteer. Now with the virtual, it's one thing that's really helping with the virtual method is we may have a volunteer in St. John's who can then assist somebody in a community outside of St. John's. So help somebody who's living in Clairville or living in Central. So that's one great option that we have with the virtual. So that's just something I wanted to touch on, and that's the end of the presentation. So again, I'm still here for more questions if you have any questions. I can't hear you, Ashley.
It seems like just a lot of appreciation. I know we get a lot of questions about disability tax credit and going through that form, and people can get confused because they can be complicated. Anytime something like that happens, just to put it out there, I am in the office and can certainly help you guys navigate that system. I've been doing it very well recently. I just helped a young man apply for university, and we went through that process together. So if it's a navigation issue, if there's something in regards to getting that certificate done, like maybe you got a lag with your doctor, which seems to be a common thing that comes up, certainly give me a call. I have no problem advocating on your behalf. Tom is asking, can ASNL write a letter to support a person who has ASD to send along with a T4? We can certainly speak about ASD and the lifelong impacts that it can have. I'm not sure if that can also be supporting documentation, and Anne-Marie, you can certainly
I'm not sure if it'd be supporting documentation. However, again, that's maybe part of the information that you're bringing then to the doctor, and the doctor can include some of that information maybe in the effects of the impairment. And that's why, again, I can't stress enough how important it is to track every day how that impairment is affecting you. Bring that then to your medical doctor. I recently did a presentation, it must have been 2 years ago, for a group of service providers, and there was a lady there who took that advice. It was for her child, or her adult child. She took that advice and she wrote that down of every day of how it's affecting. The next time I had the same session, she actually came back to say that really helped. That's what she needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So keep track of how it's affecting you in your daily living.
So I guess just a suggestion, any chance the CRA can do one-liner bullet point website adjustments. Yeah, like it can be overwhelming, Angie, I get it. And that's something that we are trying to do with our own website at the moment. It's a lot of information to put in one bullet.
It is, and CRA, We used to have our own website, so it was cra.gc.ca/maybe disability. It was easier. Since the Government of Canada moved over to the Canada.ca platform, all Government of Canada uses Canada.ca. Yeah, it tends to be a little bit longer.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So another question is in regards to that section where it talks about how it affects the daily life. Is that just on the individual or on the family as a whole?
How it affects the individual. Yeah. Yeah, it's your patient. It's talking about just the patient.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I don't think there is. I think everybody kind of has their questions out. Again, guys, I have recorded this, so we will post it onto our website and some links to our social media that'll direct you to the website. In the meantime, stay tuned for any upcoming information sessions that we may have. If there's something in particular that you guys think we should follow up on, maybe offer in regards to the ASD community, certainly send me an email. Yeah, just send me an email and we'll certainly go ahead and do that. And seek out that information. I mean, we are here to help support you guys, whether that's connecting with CRA, chatting with your doctor, whatever it is that you guys need, we are here for you. Absolutely. So that's definitely something, Angela, that we can look into. So Angela is just saying that it would be great if a volunteer through ASNL could sit down with families and individuals with the particular forms and kind of navigate that. And we're absolutely all for that. So anytime you need that level of support, certainly give us a call or pop us an email. We are available all the time. And our staff would be more than willing to help you guys through that.